Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Ruth Garrettson McCain. I'm the director of the MSW Field Program at Regis College. And it's just such a delight to have this opportunity to meet with you. And please call me Ruth. I feel bad for our students because they're required to address us professionally. And so at least I shortened it from the Dr. Ruth Garrettson McCain to Dr. Ruth, which just always makes me smile. So please refer to me as Ruth. And I'm just so privileged and honored to have this opportunity to spend some time with you today, as this is an online orientation for field instructors. If you've already been through one of these, you can just cut to the chase and be done. A little bit about me. Regis, the MSW program, is a fully online program. I actually live in Utah, in the Salt Lake City Valley, and I'm excited to be able to continue my passion towards field education, practicum education in this capacity. I was at the University of Utah for nearly 20 years, and most of that time was spent as the capacity of the field education director for the BSW program. So to have this opportunity to continue and to be involved in a master's program for the last, it'll be 4 years in July, I just consider such a privilege and an opportunity. I did my dissertation for my PhD in Ghana, developing a field education model there for a new budding social work program. And it was just fascinating. And it just continued to remind me of the passion that I have for this work. And I want to be very clear that none of this would happen. There would be no social work degrees. There would be bachelor's, master's, whichever, if it wasn't for you. So again, thank you for your time and your energy and your talents, because I know having an intern is tough initially, for sure. And it tends to smooth out, but that initial investment in your care is just greatly appreciated. And you're ensuring the future of our profession. I also think about our code of ethics when it talks about giving back to our profession. And as far as I'm concerned, what you are doing is the finest way to give back. So without further adu, I'm going to bring up a PowerPoint. Yeah, I know you love it, right? Sit back, relax, get some popcorn, walk away, come back. You can just fast forward through this, whichever makes the most sense for you. So I'm going to share my screen here. Let me just get that started here. And I'm going to, again, let me just share this. Okay, I hope you are seeing this just fine. And if not, if you'll just email me and let me know, and we can either meet personally together, which I'm always thrilled to do, or if several of us would like to get together, I'm happy to do that as well. So Regis College is in Weston, Massachusetts. And it is a fully accredited MSW online program. We admit students 3 times a year. And so that means I'm sending out interns 3 times a year. The program follows all standards set forth by the Council on Social Work Education. And again, we are just thrilled to be fully accredited. So when it comes to the Council on Social Work Education, as you know, they are the accrediting body of every MSW program. So, and they are guided by core competencies. We are still utilizing the core competencies, which I'll show you in just a few moments, that are related to 2015. Those have recently changed, now known as the 2022 EPAS. And some of the institutions you're probably working with have already started using those. We are not obligated to start using those for another couple of years. So that's why ours might look just a little bit different before we then fully switch over to 2022 core competencies. So there are 9 core competencies, and they are set up in the following fashions, which is exactly what you would expect around ethical behavior, diversity, human rights, social and economic justice, research, which sometimes our students are like, wait, what? I want to be a social worker. I don't want to be a researcher. Well, let's face it. They figure out as they're going through their program that it's really important to know what the research is saying around the most important therapeutic shifts or changes or ideology or some of the very strong standards that have been the foundation, as well as policy and procedures. It's really important that interns know your policies and procedures. And so what might that look like? And of course, the competencies around engagement, assessment, intervention, and evaluations of individuals, families, groups, and organizations and communities. Sorry, tripping over that. So field placement, as far as that theoretical knowledge, is that real practice. They can learn all they can when it comes to the books, right? But until they get out there with you, until they really start to put together what it means to be actively engaged, it just doesn't happen. And so it's just important for them to realize how critical this piece of their education is. And some of them have attitudes, just, I think we can all think back to our own practicum, and we can feel like, God, I have to work for nothing, or things of that nature. Well, it's interesting because when we look at professional programs, there are internships involved with those, practicums that are involved with those, to be able to demonstrate that you're doing what you need to do without causing harm. The people that are involved are myself as the director of field and the faculty liaison, and that's the person who is teaching your student their seminar that they meet 6 times a semester on a Wednesday evening to do a live seminar where, again, when you think back to your own experience and what that looked like. They also oversee their assignments. The liaison conducts the site visits. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a little bit. But you as the field instructor with an MSW degree, licensure with 2 years experience. Now, I want to be clear on that I do have a little leeway around what that looks like. So, for example, in the first year, it goes back to having a like degree. If there's not a clinical social worker available or an MSW with that licensure in 2 years, it can be a person with a like degree, as long as 2 things: willingness to uphold the NASW Code of Ethics, as well as willingness to adhere to the core competencies. Additionally, we add other layers around helping students really have that social work perspective. And what is really wonderful is with you as an organization, when you can provide that as well, being able to have special trainings or whatever specifically for your social work students, if you're a field instructor that does not have that degree. And again, this is not to shame or slam other professional mental health degrees. They are wonderful, and we are not in a vacuum in social work. We work together across disciplines. However, of course, we are accredited by the Council on Social Work Education, and that is why, without having some of these this other scaffolding in place, it can be very challenging to ensure that the intern is getting exactly what they need. So sometimes too, if needed, there's a task supervisor. So I've had organizations that say, for example, we don't have a social worker, but we have someone outside who we are more than happy and is more than willing to come in and do the supervision for this student. And then there's also a task supervisor in place who's overseeing that day to day. And the task supervisor would help with the field instructor in helping the student generate a learning contract, helping them generate their evaluations, but certainly at the end of the day, it falls onto the licensure of the field instructor. The students have 2 placements. If they're a traditional student, there's the Generalist, which is 480 hours, and then the specialized which is 600 hours. And again, these go over 2 semesters. So the field hours, as I indicated, 480 hours, which is about 15 hours a week for the 32 weeks. Now, there's no time that's given for sick days, holidays, all of that. And the minimum hours, yeah, I threw that in there years and years ago because now and then I'd have a student halfway through their second semester going, well, I've completed all my hours, so I'm done. And I'd say, no, you're not. You are not done until the end of the semester. Some students, when they want to be locking those 40 hours a week, nope. And so again, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of the changes with CSWE for students who are employed, where they're doing their practicum. And let's say they're doing 40 hours a week and they want to count those. I only allow them to count 15 hours to 20 hours if they're that first year student, as this is talking about here. And it looks a little different if they're specialized. And the student arranges their schedules with you. Face-to-face can look a variety of different things, including but not limited to telehealth, as I guess one of the gifts of COVID was us having to be forward thinking about how can we continue to engage and help those we serve. Because certainly, as we know, COVID did not make the needs diminish, quite the contrary. So the specialized out there doing a minimum of the 600 hours or 20 hours a week. And again, that's the minimum requirement. And once more, if they are employed and they're doing the specialization because their employment matches the criteria and competencies needed, and let's say they were working 40 hours a week, I would allow them to count 20 to 25 hours a week for that. Let's see here. So just kind of a feedback loop for the students learning. Early in the first semester, there needs to be an initial site visit. These will be done via Zoom or another platform if that's more readily accessible to you. I've had some folks reach out and say, can we do this? Talking about a different platform, because I wear 2 hats. I'm the director of field education, but I also teach a couple of the courses, the seminar courses, because I love it. So in those moments, I'm acting as the field liaison. And as long as I can connect with you, that's fine. Additionally, in the first 4 weeks, they need to develop a learning contract. And I'll show you something about that in just a little bit here. But that's ensuring that they're meeting those 9 competencies. That weekly or clinical hour of supervision, that 50 minutes with the student. There's also an online mid-practicum evaluation. I'll show you that in just a little bit. The final site visit, which will happen towards the end of the second semester, which is a wrap-up of how are things going, how did they go, and then that final evaluation. So when the student begins, I want you to think back for just a minute. And if we were doing this live, I'd be saying, okay, think back. What were some of the things that stood out to you when you were doing your practicum? So, of course, there's the excitement, there's that anxiety. I mean, this is a huge step for them, especially our traditional students who do not have an undergraduate degree in social work. This is huge because so often they're feeling like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm going to fail. Just all of those different thoughts that we have. And of course, there's multiple ways of expressing those feelings. And I think that's a wonderful opportunity in supervision to really talk about what those look like and how those feel. And, being able for you to plan time to spend with them, not only as their field instructor, but as their mentor as well, or having a task supervisor who could fill that role. Being able to have an intern shadow their workers is so helpful. Again, think back to your own experience. And oftentimes, we're in desperate need for interns. And so we really want them to jump on board, get really working, and we give them this huge caseload. Well, as we know, that can be very challenging, and it can bring up a number of problems and issues. And again, if we were meeting live, I'd ask, so what are some of those problems and issues that can arise? So I would ask you to be very sensitive about what a caseload looks like for an intern versus a regular employee. And even if it's a situation where the student has been hired in this role as well, be mindful, this is an intern first and foremost, and they have got to be able to navigate that along with life, along with coursework. You know, there are some who feel like, oh, online education, they just hand them a degree and they carry on. Oh, no, no, no. I've been involved again over 20 years in social work education. Online education is incredibly rigorous. It's incredibly critical for students to have good time management skills, which I consider also a self-care opportunity. But to be able to be self-directed is just so important. So this just is a very different situation. Of course, a tour of the agency, it's nice to know where the restrooms are, right? Those pieces. And as well as your manuals that speak to your specific policies, you can have your intern the first few weeks just really delving into policies and procedures. And if you have an orientation handout, and or perhaps as one of the students' assignments, you have them generate an orientation handout, and maybe frequently asked questions or what they wish they had known, and that's something that can continue in perpetuity with other students adding to what that handout could look like. Something to keep in mind there. It's really important that the interns have their tasks outlined, and what are the expectations around paperwork? Do you offer specific trainings and videos, for example, around safety? What would that look like within your organization? One of the early assignments that the students have, whether they're traditional or whether they're specialized clinical, is what are the organization's policies around safety? That's safety for the client, safety for themselves, safety for the organization. What do you have in place? What are the expectations around dress, use of time, cell phones, agency hours? There's just I remember I was doing an internship at one point in time. I was doing multiple internships as a student at a homeless shelter. Well, how I dressed at that internship, and I had one at the prison as well, looked very different from when I was an intern at the largest mental health organization here in the state of Utah. How I looked, how I would dress looked very different. So it's really important that your intern, your student, is clear on the expectations around dress. In fact, for the traditional students, one of their very first assignments is they put together this little blog for their class, their seminar class, where it basically shows, this is how I'm going to be dressing. This is what this is going to look like. And I love those, to see some of the outfits and such. And again, depending on the organization, what that could look like. Make sure your students are clear about your policies around social media. When I do the student orientations, I really hit them on this, about the confidentiality issues, about being careful that their social media is secured. I remind them, if you don't think you're not going to have clients who are going to want to stalk you at some point in time, you're very naive. So make sure you are always professional. Make sure your security is locked down as to who has access to be able to look at your social media. They are given one exercise where they talk about, so what happens if somebody, your organization is throwing a community meeting and there's somebody there taking photos and they're posting them on their personal Facebook page? What do you do? And they're given these, how do you handle this? What's the first thing you do to be able to maintain and honor the confidentiality of those we are serving? And if you're out, who is available to your intern? So is there a task supervisor? Is there a team that they can depend on to help navigate them? And of course, telephone etiquette, personal etiquette within the organization, and what that culture looks like. Hopefully it's warm and welcoming to interns. Sometimes it can look a little different. And given how insecure some of the interns can feel initially, they're like, oh, I'm not sure they want me there. But again, that speaks more to the intern than to your organization, but just something to be mindful of and what that can look like. Additional things is that you could have your students involved in. That's really, really helpful. It gives them some assignments. Are what I have here, just, planning for annual events, creating and developing or maintaining a resource manual, because let's face it, the minute that it's created and implemented, it's out of, it's already outdated. So things that students can do and other students then can build on to those. And I also have a list of activities that were approved by the Council on Social Work Education during COVID that still are good today, where if there's something that the student, additional assignments that you would approve, first of all, and kind of massage them into something that makes sense for your organization. And you'll notice when you received this video that also there were the additional activities that with your approval could be done by your intern. They could be done from home, they could be done from within the organization, whatever makes the most sense to you. So your tasks, of course, is to assist the student in developing a learning contract, to provide a clinical hour, a supervision, sign into timesheets on core. Now we keep track of time two ways. One, the university requires that every intern sign in and utilize core. And it's basically like a time clock. And you'll be given access to that as well, that if you'd like, you can go in and sign off on those hours. Additionally, and what I get from the students is a spreadsheet that is created for them where they keep track of activities, how it's impacting the core competencies they're working on, and then the hours done by the week. So they need to show that to you, and so that you can take a look at it as well. To read and evaluate students' process recordings. Now there's a few more of those in the traditional year than there are in the clinical year. But let me say this, there's not a huge number. Now I have heard back from, field instructors say, well, this university requires 50 trillion process recordings. And I'm like, oh, here's my take on that. We only have a few per accreditation. We were fine with accreditation by only having a few. However, my saying that, I will support however many process recordings you require as an organization. And I tell the students that as well. I'll say, here's how many you need for the program for Regis, but your organization can require more from you. What I would ask is that you think about what your policy looks like on that, and that these students are not so inundated with process recordings that they're not able to, continue on in caseloads and things of that nature. I think certainly in the beginning, it's really important for sure. And if you've got them doing 50, hopefully not, but that there's that steady decrease in what a process recording, so that they can really get into meat and potatoes. And again, with supervision, hopefully you're going through all of those questions and concerns. And I'll say that it's anticipated and hoped that your interns, when they show up for supervision, that they have questions and that they are ready to have a great conversation with you. And that, of course, your ability to develop that rapport with them will be so incredibly helpful. Now, group supervision is fine. However, it would still be expected that you would have individual supervision with your student. So say there's, a clinical hour or more of group supervision, that's wonderful. Then I would say, as long as you can get at least 30 minutes in a week or 50 minutes every 2 weeks with that student, wonderful. Let's see. The evaluations, when I generate those, and again, I'm going to show you that a little bit. When I generate those evaluations, it's going to come to you via an email. And then again, we'll talk about that in just a little bit. And of course, we're always excited for your feedback. It's important, and this is where it gets a little tricky sometimes too, is to communicate that the students are interns, not workers or volunteers. Now, in some instances, they are workers. And honestly, while the Council on Social Work Education has approved that now, that they can be doing the same job with the same supervisor if the criteria and the competencies are being met and the supervisor has the appropriate credentials. You know, I think that's wonderful, because then the students are being paid, right? Because they're doing their jobs. But I also warned them that it can be tricky. What if something happens to your job? What if there's a layoff? What if, you know, these other things? So just bearing in mind that you still have the mindset of these are now interns as well. They're in this dual role, if you will. But they're now looking at it from a very specific lens of social work. So just please bear that in mind. And please be open about sharing your own experiences in the field. Oh my goodness, I could tell you a doozy from my first year. Thank goodness for my second year. But just humanizing yourself, humanizing and normalizing the experience they're having, because they want so desperately to please you. They want to do well with those they are serving. They do not want to cause harm. And so they can have a lot of anxiety around that. And being able to schedule time to be available. So the learning contract, just briefly. So here, this is the learning contract for the generalist year. The specialized is shorter, actually. So yay. Now, when the student has this document that's expected in supervision, they're going to sit down with you and they're going to go over, okay, what are the selected tasks? Now, it's not going to have this approximate date. Forget that, because this learning contract is for the full 2 semesters. They'll update it in the second semester to see if there's anything they needed to change. But so I apologize that this slide still has that approximate date. That is no longer the case. So please ignore that. So you're going to help them develop tasks and learning activities. And then when it comes to the methods of evaluation, honestly, if I saw these 4 methods of evaluation, the supervision, feedback from colleagues and clients, midpoint evaluation, and final evaluation, and if that were copy and pasted all the way down in this 3rd column, I'd be going great, because sometimes methods of evaluation can be tricky. And sometimes what I'll see is the student put something in there that is clearly a task that needs to go back into the middle column. So I will have them address that with you, that they need to put that in the middle column around specific learning activity and tasks. And again, that first column just basically tells you what the competencies are they need to be doing. And the very top here gives you the definition of that competency. So now when it comes to the evaluation, well, you know, we are gatekeepers. And there's an academic grade and credit that goes with this course. And it is that really important time for the student to be able to with your expertise, to stop and take stock. What are they doing well? What could be improved? And so they should be planned for evaluation during supervision. The conversation, of course, should be private. And you'll notice that in the instrument you'll receive for the evaluations that there are places for you to be able to write comments. So what you'll be receiving is the evaluation tool while I generate them, it does not come from me. It comes from Ask Sweep. It often ends up in your junk mail or spam folder. So as soon as I generate these, I let the students know. And I will say, gently nudge your field instructor so that they know it's coming in, because they have got to have this turned in no later than week 16 of both the first semester and the final semester. Now, this document is the same. So this first evaluation is that midpoint, and then the final evaluation is that accumulation. The actual instrument looks a little bit different than this now. And let's see here. We'll talk about grades in just a moment, but I'm going to pause for just a second. Hold on while I pause this recording, and I'll be right back. You'll never know I was even gone. So I'm back. Before we jump back into the PowerPoint, I wanted you to actually see what the instrument looks like. So we're going to take a quick look at the traditional, the first year student. and what that looks like. So here we go. Again, you'll receive an email from @AskSweep. And then when you open the link, it's going to bring you to the instrument. And you'll notice up here, it says midpoint. And this is again from that ePass 2015 that I talked about a little earlier. And then this will be the same instrument for the final evaluation. So I'm not going to bring that up, but it will say final at that point in time, because this midpoint is your baseline. So you will do this online with your student present or via Zoom with your student, but you'll have the document up. You will be the scribe. You'll type in the student's name here, and then it's going to ask you your background, and you'll click on those that are appropriate. Then it gives you the rubric, if you will, that you're going to be using when you grade your student. Now, it is so critical that we remember that the students are interns. They are new. This is fresh to them. And so, you know, if they were to receive 3s all the way down for this midpoint evaluation, I'd be thrilled. Of course, they want 4s and 5s because they're students and they want 4s and 5s. And I often tease them. And if I happen to be your field liaison in your site visit, we're going to go over this again. So you'll get to see it again with me if you have me. So just keeping in mind that it's okay. 3s are beautiful. And I, as I was saying, I tease the students and I say, if I see a bunch of 4s and 5s in your first evaluation, I'm going to wonder what you have on your field instructor. What are the secrets that you're holding over them? Where it becomes problematic is in this area that shows 1s and 2s, because this is basically saying this intern is inadequate. They are lacking. They don't show up. They don't do the work. They are potentially causing harm. Now, if they deserve that, then that's what they should have. So you would come along here and you would just hit one of these bubbles, and you can change them when you're doing it. And then you would write any comments here. Now back to that 1 or 2. It became evident early on using this instrument that a student would receive a 1 or 2, but in the comments, the field instructor would write, the student just hasn't had the opportunity yet to do this. They will by the end of their full practicum. And I'd go, oh dear. So because that really skews the data when they're receiving that 1 or 2. So what I recommend is simply leaving it blank. You can leave any of these blank rather than skew the data saying that it was a 1 or 2 when it's just simply they haven't had the opportunity yet to do this. I did have one field instructor that said to me, well, you know, this student has been great from the beginning and I'm going to give him a 3. And I'll just put in the comments, while they haven't been able to do this yet, I would expect, given the student's performance so far, that they would have a minimum of a 3. So it's your call. But please, if it's just the fact that they haven't been able to do it yet, or they're just starting to do it, please avoid giving them a 1 or 2. If I audit every student within the program's evaluations, and if I see 1s and 2s, honestly, it's grounds for dismissal. And I would, if it were one of my other liaisons, I'd say, please reach out with the student and the faculty member and have a meeting about what is the student going to be able to do to rectify the situation. Can they rectify the situation? I'll never forget, once I sent out the evaluation and then I got it back so quickly, and I went in and it was all 1s. And, you know, I was getting ready to dial 911 because I was about to have a heart attack. I called the field instructor and I said, what is going on? What? And she said, what are you talking about? And I said, well, I got the field evaluation back and it's all 1s. And she said, oh my gosh, what she had done is she had sent the instrument to the student just to take a look at so they could have a sense of it. And the student thought that he was to grade it. Well, he and I had a long talk about he will never touch a live instrument again. But it's been in jest, and it was fun when he was graduating. And I said, I don't know, if I go back to that first evaluation, you shouldn't be graduating. But here's the thing. If the student wants to know, what does this evaluation look like? again, in the site visits with me, and I hope with all of my liaisons, they go over what this looks like. But the learning contract matches this evaluation. So if they know what they're doing with their learning contract, then they know what's going on. Now, as you go down through this, you'll see that it covers all 9 competencies. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't like zooming back and forth. So all you have to do is like hit show the scoring guide, and it'll bring it up for you again, and then you can just collapse it. At the very end, well, sorry to make you seasick here, you will complete this by typing in your name and the student's name. Sometimes when I review this, the student's name is not typed in. And so what I typically do, because I know you're all so busy, I will reach out to the intern and say, did your field instructor have the opportunity to go over your evaluation with you? If they say yes, then I say, may I have your permission to access the evaluation and sign your name? And I've never had a student say no. If the student were to say, no, we didn't go over it, I'd say, okay, please reach out to your field instructor and ask them to go over it with you so that we can get your name signed on this. Now, here where it gets a little tricky. Not really, but it gets a little tricky. At the very end where it says submit and finalize, you can do that. If you need to stop, maybe you need to finish it up the following week, you can just hit save my choices and it will. But once you finalize it, I'm going to close your eyes. I'm going to go back to the top. You will get an email from Sweep saying it's finalized, and you can go into the document again. The link will be there. And then in this area up here, there's going to be a PDF file and there's going to be a Word document file. These are very important because, and I strongly recommend using the PDF option because it's just a clearer document. You then have it in your files so that you've got it in perpetuity, however long you'd like to keep that student's evaluation. And also then you can send it to the intern as well, because they need to turn it in their week 16 in one of their final assignments. So if you just would be mindful of that. Okay, so, and it looks the same. Let me, those of you who are having the second year student, let me just quickly share that. But as I indicated, it is a little shorter. Look at this. Oh, no, that's still the, sorry. That is still the other one. Apologize for this. Just a second. Okay. Huh. I don't know why it's not coming up. Trust me, please. Trust me that the instrument is a shorter instrument. And it'll just, because again, it's the advanced and it's very specific around what's going on. So I apologize for that, but I promise you will get that. Oh, wait, hold on. Hold the phone. Here it is. Let me share. Okay, thanks. Thanks for your patience. Okay, so it looks just like the initial one, but it says up here, specialized clinical evaluation midpoint. It's got that same rubric. You would type their name in at the same, but then you're going to see that there's only like under competency. Now, remember that long list you saw on the traditional student in that first year? This looks different. There's only a few questions because it's much more focused on the clinical aspect. You would do it exactly the same. Again, you can hit those scoring guides. They still come up. It's the same thing around those darn 1s and 2s. And then you sign the student's name and the signature. And if you're finished, you just finish. And then similarly, at the top of the evaluation, then you'll get that email from Sweep that says it's done. And then you can go back in and do it from there. So let's go back to the slideshow. I promise we are almost done. You've been so patient. Thank you for that. Okay. Let me just start this again. All right. So hopefully you're seeing that again. Okay. So when it comes to the grades, the final grade is recommended, but not conferred by the field instructor. It's actually conferred by the field liaison, because they also have a ton of work they're doing in seminar that speaks to the field experience. Like they're attending seminars, they're writing journals, they're doing a bunch of other things that collaborate very nicely with what's happening in field. So please, in fact, in your comments, when you do your evaluations at that midpoint and at the final evaluation, you could put in what you feel like the student should receive as far as grade. We know there's grade inflation, and it's okay to keep perspective. And you know what? Not everyone is an A student, but guess what? If you felt like they are, they are. It's totally up to you. So bearing that in mind. Now they have a document that they have to sign prior to starting field, and it's the risk acknowledgement of risk. This is now required by all Regis interns. I generated this during COVID, and now all of the students have to sign this. And basically what they are acknowledging in this document, and they can't really be in practicum without signing this document. You can always say, hey, did you find your risk of acknowledgement of risk, sorry. And this speaks to the communicable diseases, civil unrest, natural disasters. And let's face it, with COVID, we saw all of these things over and over and over. And it's just really important, because again, the need for our services don't decrease during unrest. They don't decrease during disasters or world pandemics. They increase. And so we need to be mindful that there are risks associated with that. And again, as I mentioned earlier, what are your policies and procedures around safety in the field? What type of trainings do you have? If you don't have a training, great, give it to your student. Have them start generating what a training could look like, of course, with your final approval. And then, dealing with problems. We know there's minor problems and major problems. I want to be very, very, very clear. And I tell the students this, and I do it also in my site visit if I'm your field liaison, is that I have our students back, but I also have our field instructors back, because social work is not done in a vacuum. We have to all come together as a team. Let's say your student's name is Jason. I speak to the fact, if I'm your liaison, we are Team Jason. And that means we hold you accountable, we ensure that you're acting professional, and we cheer you on. So, now and then there might be bad mouthing of the school or agency. And I will say, if in seminar, when we held a seminar, it's a confidential setting. But if I were to hear bad mouthing of our school or of your agency, I would immediately put a stop to it in a professional fashion. And from a strengths perspective, come at that with, okay, how do we shift this? What's generating this? And what is lovely in those seminars, how the students will jump in from a very wonderful strengths perspective to really try to get to the bottom of, okay, what's going on with the student that they're feeling this way. So these are just some thoughts around, dealing with problems and different learning styles, etc. But that's why you're the field instructors, because you're awesome at what you do. And your field liaison has your back. I have your back, and I'm always willing. The field liaison would be the first person that, there would be a meeting involved if need be, and then I would be brought in my role as director if necessary. Just like with our clients, we want to make sure if there's problems occurring that we document and that we discuss the problem with the student. It's just like when I was a field instructor and I was doing an evaluation, if I came to a situation where I felt the student really had bombed something and the student was totally surprised, we'd have a conversation. Maybe I dropped the ball somewhere. And in that moment, I would shift how I was going to respond to that field evaluation. Or guess what? Maybe the student totally bombed it and just doesn't have that self-awareness to be able to figure that out. Again, it's just so important. Document, 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 right? We all know the adage, if it wasn't documented, it didn't happen. And so again, as a team, we will strive to partner with the student for success. And that happens 99.9% of the time. It is successful. But there's always that outlier where, all the best laid plans just don't work out. Of course, more risky, serious problems that would mean immediate cease and desist are noted here. And this is just a few. They could look so many different ways. But these would generate the student immediately being, we would immediately meet. There would be a pause in the internship, and it may be the end of the internship. Gatekeeping. And that infamous question, what would I be willing for the student to provide services to someone I care about? I remember sitting in a national conference one time and them talking about a gatekeeping. And some of people who I consider having the most brilliant minds saying, well, we shouldn't be gatekeeping, blah, blah, blah. There's this self-determination, there's this, there's that. And I just sat there with my jaw on the floor. Yes, we should. We should be gatekeeping, absolutely, in my humble opinion. But that looks a number of ways, right, as we use our own professional skill set to help guide these interns. So final thoughts and questions, please, 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 if you have any questions, and if you'd like to hit respond all to this video and ask the questions, because if you've got it, somebody else probably does as well. But I'm always happy as the director to meet with you one-on-one and have some conversations if in fact you have those. So just my contact information here, and Dr. Considine, who's the program director, her contact information as well. So you'll be able to sit back and through, if you need something to help you sleep at night, you just turn on this video and you'll be able to go right to sleep. Again, I just want to thank you so much for all of your help, your care, your consideration, and your willingness to give back to, I consider, the most frustrating, the most joyful profession on the planet. So thank you all again. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of the day. Take care. Bye-bye.